Hello there, listeners, and welcome to the Crystal Cove Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Braxton, and in this podcast we will talk about a wide range of topics related to horror and filmology. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a few different things, but mostly the importance of comic relief in past, present, and possible future horror movies. Now, if you enjoy my content and my podcast, please like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. Anyway, the importance of comic relief. See, that's a very important thing about horror. Like, there are movies like House of a Thousand Corpses, House of Wax, a few different things, a few different horror movies that don't necessarily need comic relief. Ones that are darker and they don't really have an upside to them. Now, those are horror movies I'm not particularly a fan of, but everybody has their own opinion. But movies in the past specifically had pretty good amount of comic relief, like Scream. Randy, he was very funny. He was always panicky, especially after the first murder and the first film, of course. And the second one didn't work out too well. Still, comic relief is a little bit underrated in the minds of horror fans, but I think it should be appreciated more. Like if you're on the edge of your seat and you're freaking out, and then it cuts to another scene, then you're still on edge. But if it leads to a conversation that is unrelated, and it causes a joke, it relieves the stress for a few moments at least. And that helps people enjoy the movie more. Because if you have, start out real low on, stressful and go all the way up to just really terrible, horrifying stuff, it could possibly get a little boring, let's say they remake the Friday the 13th. They tried too hard with the graphics and the violence. Sure, it was pretty good, but they should have done a little bit more on the comic side. And there's also a problem that comes from comic relief, is trying too hard. That's a big problem, Like in Friday the 13th remake, they did a lot with stoner comedy. And that's funny, There's plenty of movies that aren't horror movies that have that funny side to them. This Is the End, which is a funny one. Pineapple Express. There's plenty. But in horror movies, that's the thing, that it tries too hard. But when you don't try too hard, but you make an audience laugh, it's good. Like I was saying, when you go from stressful to horrifying, immediately, and you stay on that top scale, it can get boring after a while. But if it starts out kind of nervous and stressful because you're worried about what's going to happen, and then you get relief by characters laughing at jokes and hanging out and watching TV or something like that. And then it gets stressful as the killer shows up, and it gets stressful and stressful and stressful. But then there's that one character in the background that makes a joke every once in a while. So the level is stressful, horrifying, but then calms down, and then builds up, calms down, builds up. And that makes a movie more memorable. It sticks with you more. And that's a big thing about film, and not just horror movies, films in general, building stakes, building events, and then having payoff to those events. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is not a horror movie, absolutely not, does that very well. Because it starts out, you're rooting for Miles, the main character, who is Spider-Man in another universe. You're rooting for him to get to grips with his powers and become the Spider-Man of that universe. And he gets taught by all the other Spider-Man, and he's trying to figure out his way. And the first time he's really controlling his powers is in probably the biggest fight, which is with Kingpin, the big bad guy of that film. The point that I'm trying to get at is, in that movie, they took a character that is not that liked, who isn't as loved as Peter Parker, or even Spider-Man Noir, or those other Spider-Men, and they made him, they achieved his goals. They achieved your goals. When you see that moment when he's swinging around finally successfully without error, that he's still learning his way. He slips a little bit when he's slinging, but that's not the point. The point is they do that on purpose. The point is that it builds up the fact this kid isn't ready to do this fight. And then it corrects itself. Yes, he is. Because he has to be. And that is, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of film. Any kind of film. Is build up. Making sure you know the facts of the story. And what it needs to get to for the movie. For the movie's climax and for the movie's ending. To reach those goals. If it doesn't reach those goals, then it's not satisfying. It's not payoff. When I watched Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse, I left smiling. I left laughing. I loved it. It was great. And that's a good thing about horror movies. There are movies that end terribly. But there are movies that end pretty good. Look at the original Poltergeist. 19, around that era. In that movie ends with them going into a hotel, after the house isn't imploded by all the afterlife. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, after that, they go in their room and they close the door, and it stays on the room for a minute, but away from the room, so it's not too completely your attention. You're just okay, well, it's about to go dark. But then the door opens, and the dad comes out with the TV and slides it against the railing outside and closes the door because of all the stuff that happened with the TV in the movie. That is where comic relief comes in. Because after all the stuff that happened, you're stressed out, and you're like, man, that was a lot. And then you laugh. You can get what I'm saying. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Is, personally, my opinion, when I watch a movie that is sad and it's building up to, you can feel like a big climax where people are going to be happy, it's going to give you chills and make you happy, and then it doesn't, and you leave the movie theater thinking how they could have done that extremely better than the way they did it, that is, in my opinion, when a movie has kind of failed. In my opinion, a few years ago, a movie came out called Hostiles. I think Christian Bale was in it. Yeah, I think he was in it. He played Batman. Anyway, in that movie, he played a cowboy. But in that movie, a lot of sad stuff happened. And the movie, it tried to end on a happy tone, but it went straight from terrible, terrible sadness to trying to make you happy about them riding away on the train. Now, I understand that. Some movies do that good. But when it doesn't feel like that payoff has meant anything. Sure, they got revenge. They saved the day, quotation marks. It doesn't feel like it has much impact. It feels like they're at the exact same point in the story as they were when it began. Just a few different things done. Some bad guys are dead, some good guys are dead. Some bad guys are alive, some good guys are alive. That's the only difference that I saw in that movie. And that is, in my opinion, how that movie and a few others like it has failed. But I don't want to be really rude and criticize, because other than that, that movie is just, mwah, it's beautiful. Like the set pieces, the sunsets, the sunrises, all the ways that they really did capture the Old West. And I get that the Old West is supposed to be sad. It wasn't always happy, riding into the sunset, Clint Eastwood style. But could have made it a little happier. But that's not the point I'm getting at. Comic relief and payoff and things like that amount to a story. And when you don't have that, then it doesn't feel that good. But I can say that even if you didn't completely enjoy a movie, but you kind of did, but if the people around you didn't, you kind of feel that energy, Like if you were watching a movie that you thought was great, but you realize people that meant a lot to you didn't, then it feels like you're pushing the movie to what it is and what it's not. Anyway, Hostels, other than the fact that it's real sad, it's actually a really good movie. You should definitely watch it. Hostels, Christian Bale, pretty sure it's Christian Bale. It's very good. It's extremely well. A movie that did the whole Old West successful ending thing very well was, I think, 2017 or 2016's The Magnificent Seven. It had Chris Pratt in it, Denzel Washington, a few others. And that, I think Jennifer Lawrence was in that too. Anyway, they did that very well at building up expectations as how the movie was going to end, changing those expectations, but keeping them in a way that when it ended, it made you happy, it made you cry. I just enjoyed that movie, and I really want to suggest that movie to you too. Which, it's not a horror movie. The movies that I've discussed in the last few minutes haven't been exactly horror movies, but that's not what this channel is completely about. Sure, horror movies, I love horror movies, but I love all films, and that's what this channel is about, to talk with you guys about films. So if you guys have anyway, I really suggest you guys check those out. Those are really, really good movies. Hostels, it's actually really good. It's really good, Like, if you look close enough, every movie's gonna have its flaws. Every movie, Even the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. I look back at them, they don't hold up that well, but I saw them as a kid. Like a real little kid, I mean. And that nostalgic factor has made it very memorable for me. Like, I like the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern. Okay? I'm nuts. I mean, I haven't seen it in a long time, but I did like it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I don't want you to think that I use this just, correct people's opinions about their own movies or movies that they see that they think's great. I don't want them to listen to this and think that they're wrong about those movies, because they're not. Everybody has their own opinion. I have my own opinion, and that's why I'm here. So if you guys leave comments in the description below, please, and get back to me. Suggest movies and different factors of films and horror movies of all kinds in the description, and I might talk about them in another episode, and I will use your name if you're cool with that, Anyway, as always, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I hope you enjoyed the second installment of the Crystal Cove Podcast. And I hope all of you have a very, very nice day. Thank you.